Hello, I'm Chip Denton, head of school, and I'm here with our lower school director and one of our lower school teachers to talk about the unit studies that we do in lower school. Since the beginning of Trinity, from the very first year, these were at the heart of Trinity's rich and unhurried classical education. And so thank you, Amy and Melissa. Will you all introduce yourselves? And yeah.
I'm Amy Chauncey, the interim lower school director.
I'm Melissa Hardemank, and I teach second grade here at Trinity.
So unit studies, Amy, what is a unit study? And what's an example at Trinity?
A unit study is a thematic look at one topic, science and/or social studies or history. And we start that at TK. It goes through fifth grade, and it is a slow seep of information about a particular topic. Some of the topics are birds, the life cycle of a frog, the history of Rome, or United States of America states.
And Melissa, what are unit studies that you do in second grade? What are some of the ones?
Some of the unit studies that we do in second grade are looking at the history of early America with the native peoples who lived here, especially around the area where we now call North Carolina, and the early settlers who came, the American Revolution, the time of the pioneers and the westward expansion. And then we have a lot of fun science units. Also, we study magnets, life cycles of animals, and animal tracking.
Okay. I want to come back to that and take a deeper dive into the second grade, but Amy, if we could talk a little more generally. So unit studies, not all schools organize their education in this way, right?
Right.
So it's a distinctive of Trinity. We're not the only school that does this, but it's a particular distinctive of Trinity. Why is that important to Trinity?
It addresses a lot of issues and challenges that come up in a classroom when you look at learning styles. It gives teachers the opportunity to incorporate all students with activities that are hands-on, creative opportunities, and it also gives many opportunities for individual work, group work, project-based, and then presentations where we invite others in to see the culminating event based on a unit study. So it does offer a variety of student learning going on with a slow look at the particular topic.
Wow, I heard so much in what you just said that's just so missional to Trinity. Slow, the unhurried piece, the opportunity to present and talk, so that classical goal of teaching students to communicate. And they start this very young and work their way up through. And also just the way the unit studies address learners of different sorts, with different learning styles. So it's a really important piece of Trinity's mission.
You see it effective in the classroom through the teachers' organization and planning for how students will experience pioneers and what their lives were like. And then also you see it with the individual work and communication between us two students or a group of students and the teacher and the student. And it is an opportunity for kids to slowly learn through read-alouds, quality literature, and creative discussion, thoughtful questions posed at different age levels for kids to really slow down and take a look at the unit.
Wow. And sounds very much like what people talk about when they talk about 21st century learning and the skills that students will need to thrive in this knowledge economy and collaboration and critical thinking. So that's great. And you mentioned some of the sort of culminating events that happen and across the grades. Let's see, there's Pharaoh Day in the fourth grade, and we have Greco-Roman Day. What are some of the other things that culminate?
Pioneer Days at the end of the Pioneer unit.
Right.
Leonardo Day at the end of a Leonardo unit. Yep. And then
Fairy Tale Day.
Fairy Tale Days,
Yeah.
yes. Students write their own fairy tales, create their own fairy tale character, and get to present a
Right.
fairy tale play that they have actually written. And
States and countries in third grade.
explorers in third grade
Yeah.
also, where they
Yeah.
look at explorers and survival techniques that explorers needed to be familiar with to make it through their treks. So there are a variety of culminating events that are the hallmark of Trinity. It is very distinctive, and it is very inclusive. Families, grandparents, siblings come from other classes to see these presentations.
Yeah. Well, Melissa, let's take a little bit deeper dive into your curriculum so folks can get an understanding just as an example.
Sure.
Could you talk about one of your units?
Yes. So I'm going to talk about the one we're doing right now
Okay.
because it's one of my favorites. So we look at the life cycles of several different animals. And this week we started by looking at the life cycle of a frog. And one of the things that I loved was even before we started, I had brought the empty aquarium down from storage into the classroom, and that alone started questions and wonderings from the
Yeah.
children. So it was
That's
exciting.
great. Yeah.
It was more exciting when we put
Just
the
an
tadpoles
empty,
in.
aquarium
An empty
starts the-
aquarium
yeah.
sparked
Wow.
lots of conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
imagine what happens when it's full of
that's
something.
right.
Yeah.
So the first day I didn't tell them what we were doing. They know now that when I say I wonder, that means I want them to spend some time wondering about what might happen. And the next day they came in and there were tadpoles in the aquarium, and some children knew. Their guess was, we're going to study frogs. I know, I remember my brother or my sister studied frogs. So there is that tradition that goes from year to year that kids have these, they have eager expectation for what will happen in the next grade. And one of my favorite things is just starting a unit with all that time for the kids to wonder and ask questions. On that first day, I just put that tank in the middle of a table and had 6 kids around it, just asking questions, talking to each other. What do you observe? What do you see? It was really exciting.
That's great. And do you study other life cycles as well besides
We
frogs?
do. So we
Yeah.
study the life cycle of a chicken, which
Yeah.
is probably our most famous unit
Right.
study in second grade. They start asking me from the beginning of the year, are we going to hatch chicks and when's that going to happen?
There's always a buzz
then-
around school whenever the chicks are,
There
when the
is.
eggs are there,
There is.
incubating, and
Yes. And then we also study the life cycle of the butterfly. And with all 3 of those units, they just lend themselves so well to an inquiry-based approach where the students ask questions, and I don't see it as my job to answer their questions right away. I see their questions as an entry point into what we're learning. They answer a lot of their questions themselves as they're observing the animals that we have in the classroom or that we see outdoors. And then as we start reading books about the topic, some of our questions get answered, or as we spend more time in the topic with observations, they answer their questions.
Yeah. I love that the goal of classical education is to teach students to learn for themselves.
Right,
And essential skills in that are learning to ask questions
right,
and then learning to know how to find answers
Right.
for oneself.
right.
Where to go, talk to others,
Yes.
read, research.
And that's one of the exciting opportunities with
Yeah.
unit studies is you really get to have that learning experience from a wide variety of angles, from talking with one another in a partnership or in a group, from reading a book, or from, trying to find a book that will, that we didn't find that answer yet. Let's see if we can keep looking and find another book. So from all different angles, they're really trying to answer their questions and go deeper in their learning.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask:
Okay.
Do you use the internet and the iPods? iPads to,
We do just a little bit toward the end of second grade. Most of our research, so children are at a wide variety of skill levels in second
Right.
grade with reading. So a lot of our reading for information in second grade comes from read alouds that the teachers
Right.
read. They start to read for themselves to learn and to get information toward the end of the year through books or articles. Scholastic News are a great source of they have so many nonfiction topics for us that often match with our unit studies. So it's great to line those up. And those are written at a second grade level. So those are very accessible to the students. And toward the end of the year, when we're learning about insects, we study the life cycle of the butterfly, and then each student studies their own insect. And we do use the iPads. We have developed a series of QR codes that bring students to certain sites with information about their insects, so they can read, watch videos, and
So
then
it's
gather
controlled and
information.
curated by you.
It's controlled and curated.
Yeah, that's
Mhm,
great.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent. So,
Yeah.
well, as you're talking, I'm thinking that these unit studies really integrate a number of different, what we would call the classic subjects, whether it's math or literature or
Right.
history. And
Right.
I'd love to hear both of you talk about how that happens at Trinity, that integration.
Do you want to start? Yeah.
All unit studies include information that is across the content areas. And some unit studies lend themselves to incorporating math or other content areas. But generally, we do look at how students learn and remember facts and new information by building a common language of vocabulary and key concepts, and then giving them the opportunity to speak and do something with those key concepts. And after building that common language, we have the groundwork for students to do presentations, to expand out of what they knew previously, build on old information that they are familiar with, and broaden their scope of understanding of a particular unit.
Yeah.
Right. I think that reading and writing is certainly a part of almost every unit. But what I love about unit studies is also to have time for talking, painting. I love when the students paint the tadpoles that we have. And, if I said, what colors do you think you're going to use to paint a tadpole? You might say green or brown. Then you look at the tadpole and you see all these different shades of green and brown and yellow. And guess what? There's red. So just that time to paint and observe carefully, time to talk, to share information orally also. So again, integrating all these different aspects of learning is really a fun part of unit studies.
I was visiting a class the other day that was memorizing a poem that was related to their
Love
unit.
that, yeah.
To their unit study, and the practice in small groups, reading it silently to themselves, then with a partner, then adding other students to their group, and then chorally practicing it as a class was such a building opportunity and scaffolding all sorts of skills that are reading, pre-reading skills for young children, and then also incorporating just the activity of the mind and creating ideas about that poem so that the children can talk in small groups and individually with what is the poet trying to communicate. So that was an exciting piece of a unit study that I observed the other day.
Yeah, I love that connection. And Frog and Toad, you
Right.
guys can
Okay,
read.
yeah.
There's lots of things
Yes.
you could think
And
about
we're
reading.
memorizing a poem called The Pollywog right
Yeah.
now. That's kind of a silly poem, which is fun. And reading books like Frog and Toad, or we have an adapted version of The Wind in the Willows. So bringing in classic literature is really important also. And also
think-
songs.
Yes.
We have
Oh,
songs
great.
for several of our units. And the children end up memorizing a number of the songs if they really love them. And there's a lot of great information they learn through song
Yeah.
as well.
I love the way that unit studies can sort of just set kids out on an adventure of learning that they don't really know where it's, and you don't know where it's going
Right,
to lead. It's
right.
probably different every year, right?
Right.
Which is part of the excitement, and
Right.
that one good question leads to another good question, and that
Yes.
may launch you off into a different topic.
Right. You always have your key concepts, like Amy was saying before, and key vocabulary, but then you can go in a lot of different directions. The other day, the kids were talking about poison dart frog. So I said, tomorrow I should read a poison dart frog book at lunch. And that was a fun way to kind of carry off what they were wondering about.
That's great.
I also enjoy seeing the enthusiasm of teachers because it's fresh and it can go in a different direction and they can incorporate interests that they have personally and expand the unit in a way that is unexpected to them and can be child-led or just bounces off of their own personal interest that brings an excitement to the classroom by their enthusiasm.
Yeah, that's great. So I wanted to ask you both how parents can be involved in this learning process with our unit studies.
Sure. I think parents play a really important role in continuing the education of what we're doing in the classroom with the students. I mean, one simple thing is to get books at the library about the topic that your children are learning at school and read more and read things that your student is particularly interested in. I sometimes mention in my emails to families ideas for a trip to take. So one of my students recently went to Williamsburg, and we had just studied colonial America, and someone else went to see the Wright Brothers Memorial, and we had learned about the history of the Wright Brothers. So those are big things, but there's little things too. Like when we were studying animal tracks, I suggested take a walk with your family this weekend in the woods and see if you can see signs of animals that have been there. So little things to big things, I think families can really do a lot to enhance the learning experience.
One thing that I have been so impressed with on the culminating event days are the volunteers. We could not do those days without the volunteers. And so it gives the opportunity for students to share with their families, but also to multitask. A classroom can be organized with multiple hands-on activities when there are additional parents that volunteer to do these things. And it's a wonderful peek inside what is actually going on, whether it's grinding cranberries to make cranberry sauce and they need help with the grinder, or whether it's actually helping them with watercolors when they're doing a watercolor wash on a particular painting that they have done. But the importance of parent volunteers in the classroom for these big events is an exciting learning opportunity for parents, but it's also so appreciated by our teachers and students.
It is. Yeah, it means the world to children when their families are here for their big events. And I agree, we could not do our units without parent volunteers. It really means a lot to know that we have the support from parents to come in and help, because unit studies are very hands-on, very labor-intensive and preparing. So it's really great when parents can come help.
It's one of the biggest gatherings of parents that we have here are those culminating events. I always look forward to seeing lots of parents here and on field trips too, which are,
Often
sometimes connected to the unit studies. So those are great. And I also have appreciated the way the teachers have made ways for parents to learn, maybe through technology, like with Seesaw, I think, to learn what the students might be learning about. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, one example, so Seesaw is an online learning journal between a student and his or her parents, our family. And so one example would be after a field trip we took, which was called Colonial Living Day, where we go and there's booths set up and you can meet the doctor and the person dyeing wool and the school teacher, all these different people with trades from colonial times. We took lots of photographs that day, and when we came back to school, the students each made a pic collage using an app, basically making a picture collage, and then they put it on their Seesaw page and talked about it and told to tell their families what they learned, what they saw, what they enjoyed, and then the parent gets a notification that there's something there, so they can click the link, see what there is to see, maybe listen to a 30-second or 1-minute snippet from their child.
That's great. Yeah, I've appreciated what the first graders have done with Leonardo Day and ways in which the parents have been able to learn about it in similar ways, and then the fairy tale days when they prepare the children read the fairy tale of their own making, and so there's lots of ways that parents can learn and as you say, keep the learning going, keep that adventure going. So.
And I think the nice thing about some of the, especially with Seesaw, is that a traditional way that children communicate what they've learned is through writing.
Yes.
And that's one skill that we're teaching, and we're teaching well at Trinity, but there are other ways children communicate. And I think the seesaw can show other ways. It can give children opportunities for
Yeah.
other ways to communicate with their parents too.
Well, and especially at second grade, they may be able to talk a little more fluently than they
Than
are
they
able
can
to
write.
And it also allows students with different learning styles to communicate. So it's
Yes.
yeah, it's wonderful.
Yes.
What about teachers, Amy? This is a challenging way to teach, isn't it? It asks a
is.
lot of teachers. Can you say a bit about that?
It does ask a lot of teachers. Probably the most important successful units that students participate in have the backdrop of an enormous amount of preparation time from a teacher. Seeking out appropriate reading resources, seeking out hands-on activities that enhance the concepts and vocabulary that they've learned and practiced, and looking for creative ways for different learning styles to be incorporated in the unit. With the hub being the topic at hand. So with the preparation time of preparing for that unit, and units can last a long time. And so it's a continuous effort on the teacher's part to enhance what students are learning through a captivating initial exposure on the first day of new information. And I think that part is the hallmark of units, is it really is teacher dependent. And we have a lot of conscientious teachers here who spend an enormous amount of time looking for appropriate resources and hands-on opportunities that enhance a particular unit.
Yeah. Yeah, I would echo that. I think just the amount of time that teachers spend, and it means that finding Trinity teachers, teachers who want to teach this way, is an extra challenge for us, because it is a lot of work, as you can attest. And I'm so appreciative of our teachers. Thank you, Melissa, on behalf of all of our faculty. And it's also a wonderful thing, too, about having a group of teachers that have been together for a long time, because each year the units become more and more rich, I think. Don't you think that's true? And we want sometimes to develop new units. That happens, too, and there's a process for that. But there's something really wonderful about sort of just the patina that develops over time on these units and how rich they become.
Yes.
Well, thank you both for talking about this. We talk at Trinity about a classical, rich, unhurried Christian education, and unit studies capture so much of that. And it's one of the ways, just one of the ways, but a really important way that we do that. So thank you for your work, and thanks for talking with me today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Non nobis.